Immortality. No good science fiction or fantasy universe is truly complete without at least a few select people being allowed to live forever. And the galaxy of the 41st millennium is no different. And the 31st millennium too. And don't worry, we'll definitely talk about both of those. But I feel like the question does have to be asked. If you're one of the chosen few in 40k that can keep on keeping on in a pretty horrible existence, which is actually better? Living forever in a bleak and fractured galaxy that is on the verge of being torn apart, or dying and having your soul get torn apart and devoured by a bunch of demons? Wow, what a great way to start this video. Are you experiencing an overwhelming sense of impending doom and sadness yet? I promise I will tone down the existential horror a few notches as we go along here. I might have to bring it back up here and there though, but I'll try my best not to. No promises. All of our favorite science fiction and fantasy settings have immortality figured out in their own unique ways. In Star Wars, highly trained Jedi can transfer their consciousness from the living force into the cosmic force, which allows them to interact with still alive people to varying degrees. I feel like that doesn't really fully count though, because they're literally ghosts, but still, it's gotta be kinda cool to see your old master just appear in front of you. And it's cool too that Force Ghosts can also see other Force Ghosts and kinda just hang out, like Anakin and Obi-Wan and Yoda just chilling at the end of Return of the Jedi. I guess it would be sorta different if you were one of the dozens of Jedi that were brutally murdered by Anakin and then you figured out how to become one with the cosmic force or whatever, and after decades of trying to manifest your spirit self back in reality so you could communicate with your loved ones, you just see Anakin like hanging out like, "Oh, hey, yeah, it's me, the Chosen One. Sorry for hacking you apart in the Jedi Temple. I was just like so angry, and it was this whole thing. I was trying this new approach to governing where I would take over the galaxy, but that didn't really work, and I just kept killing more Jedi and also more regular people, like a lot of regular people. We built a moon-sized laser weapon and called it the Death Star. Looking back, I definitely went a little bit off the rails. So crazy, right? But anyways, yeah, I've just been completely at peace as a Force Ghost for the last 50 years, so I guess it's cool you can finally join us." I tried really hard on that Anakin impression, by the way. I know that sounded nothing like him, but I tried. Also, I've been way too lax on keeping up with my Star Wars lore, so feel free to yell at me in the comments about anything I'm wrong on here. Anywho, Force Ghosts aren't the only immortals in Star Wars, because there is another way. For example, dear viewer, have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? It's not a story that other 40k YouTubers would tell you. As Palpatine told Anakin, Darth Plagueis had discovered how to manipulate midichlorians to create life. Now, the dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural, but that didn't stop Palpatine, aka Darth Sidious, from transferring his consciousness into a cloned version of himself right after Anakin threw him into the reactor shaft of the Death Star, setting us up for the greatest moment in cinematic history.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Bruh.
This moment actually made me lose all the passion I had for Star Wars since childhood, which left me with a big hole in my heart that I wanted to fill with another science fantasy setting, which led me to finally learning about 40k, which led me to this exact moment, like this one now, that you're watching. So that's neat. But yeah, there are other ways that Star Wars characters could hypothetically live on past their deaths, but those are the main two. And I've somehow spent the majority of the start of this video talking about something not 40k related, so let's switch gears to Lord of the Rings. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest, I love watching lore videos about the Lord of the Rings, but I'm a complete noob when it comes to truly understanding it, so I will not even attempt to explain any of it in this video. But immortality is one of the core themes in Tolkien's universe, so that's good. The last 5 minutes have been too full of peace and not enough cosmic horror and despair, so we're gonna get back to 40k here. My point though is that immortality is an essential component of any good science fantasy universe. And as you can probably guess, 40k's versions of immortality are not really like the others I talked about. The Jedi get to hang out peacefully in literal nirvana. The elves in Middle-earth would reach their prime and just stay there forever, beautiful and perfect. And then we have our favorite setting. There is no nirvana here, and no Foo Fighters either. Right, guys? Can you believe that my stand-up career hasn't taken off yet with material like that? I bet you can. I need to get to the point here. As humanity progressed from the millennium we find ourselves in now, a select few people here and there were revealed to just be able to keep living. These are Perpetuals, humans, but technically not actually humans, whose cells are capable of infinite regeneration. There are some Perpetuals that we know quite well, and we'll talk about them today. A A personal favorite of mine is Olanius Person, who also became known as Olanius Pius, who preferred to go by Ol, which made his name Ol Person. How fitting for a man who lived to be 45,000 years old. Olanius was one of the most interesting characters in the setting because he served as a direct tie back to Old Earth. He claimed to have sailed with Heracles aboard the Argo as they ventured to Colchis in search of the Golden Fleece. He also supposedly served in the Napoleonic Wars, the First World War, and was even extremely close with the Emperor at one point, serving as his war master. And this was like a really long time ago, by the way. He also estimated that he was about 45,000 years old during the Horus Heresy, which would actually make him older than the Emperor. And that being said, we also actually have no idea how old the Emperor really is. And also, when a dude is guesstimating his age with plus or minus multiple millennia, it's safe to say that we should probably take what he says with a grain of salt. Olanius was also interesting for another reason, and that was his faith. I'm going out on a limb here, because I'm not 100% sure if this is the case, but I'm pretty certain that I'm right in saying that Olanius Person was the last person in the galaxy who practiced Catholicism. That's right, even though the Emperor spent centuries crusading against all forms of religious worship on Earth, Olanius still kept his faith. He even ended up settling on the peaceful agri-world of Calth in the realm of Ultramar, intending to live a simple life as a farmer and practice his faith in peace. And this plan worked perfectly, until the Word-Bearers unleashed some of the most powerful demons in existence on Calth and poisoned its sun and burned away its atmosphere and turned it into a death world. Understandably, Olanius left. He actually managed to snag an Athema dagger that could cut holes in the fabric of reality and use that to get off-world, alongside some other Calth-ians. After a few horrifying years of travel through the warp, Olanius and his cohort finally emerged on Terra. Olanius had one purpose in his travel from Calth: to personally meet with the Emperor. And after a whole lot of hijinks, like genuinely I can't even begin to describe all the hijinks right now because it would add another 20 minutes to this video, Olanius got his wish. He found himself in a position that I think it's safe to say none of us would want to be in. He had been teleported to the room where Horus, now at his final stage of chaos, corruption, and power, had beaten the Emperor into unconsciousness. Olanius shoved the Athema blade he had been carrying since Calth into the Emperor's grasp and turned towards Horus, who was lumbering across the deck towards him. The man who had once been the Emperor's war master raised his las rifle and fired full auto at the current war master, emptying the clip into his chest. This accomplished nothing, and Horus tore him apart with one swing of his lightning claw. Physically, he turned Olanius to mist. Psychically, he obliterated his soul. His perpetual nature would not save him this time. After 45,000 years, Olanius Person had finally, truly died. But did it accomplish nothing? Olanius' last act had been absolutely futile. Shooting Horus Lupercal with a las rifle when he was a newborn baby would have done nothing to him, never mind when he was at the stage of being the most powerful living being in the galaxy. But the few seconds he bought for the Emperor may have been what saved the galaxy from Horus's chaos-fueled reign. Because the Emperor did regain consciousness, and in the final moments of their confrontation, Horus had a moment where he relented. He realized that while he thought he had been waging war on his own terms, he had instead been a puppet of the Dark Four, that every decision he had made had been influenced in a way that would benefit them and them alone. He felt their power within him briefly weaken, and in that moment, he knew that it had to be now or never, that he wouldn't be strong enough to resist them when they returned to make him do their bidding and kill his father once and for all. And so he thought to beg the Emperor for forgiveness. He couldn't bring himself to ask for it. He knew that he had gone way too far. I mean, come on, demons were eating people on the surface of Earth at that very moment. But Horus's thoughts were flooded with regret, and so he allowed the Emperor to get close. The Emperor held a knife in his hand, a knife that had been taken from a chaos cultist on Calth, the knife that had allowed Olanius to cut through the fabric of reality to make his way to Terra, the knife that Olanius had placed into the Emperor's grasp while he lay unconscious mere moments before. The Emperor looked at the knife, looked at Horus, and told him, "I forgive you." And with that, he drove the knife into his son's heart. Now, there are a lot of variations and interpretations of what exactly played out in this situation I just described, and obviously I left some detail out to try to keep things a little bit more succinct, but I think this end to the story of Olanius Person does an incredible job of demonstrating that he's pretty much the GOAT perpetual. He fully dedicated himself to saving humanity at any cost, but in a way that really pulls at your heartstrings, he also dedicated himself to saving his friend. And his legacy lives on, even though he doesn't. The legend of Saint Olanius Pius, the lone guardsman who sacrificed his life to save the life of the Emperor, is one of the most well-known myths circulating around the Imperial Guard in M41, and the Order of Olanius Pius is the highest honor that can be bestowed upon an Imperial soldier. Now, there are some other Perpetuals who played very important roles in the chaos that was unfolding after Calth was attacked. One of them was John Grammaticus. John was another human Perpetual, but he was a bit different. He was a member of the Cabal. Well, I say he was a member. He was less of a member of the Cabal and more of a barely willing pawn. The Cabal was a secretive organization that operated on a galactic scale. Its members comprised hundreds of different intelligent species from around the galaxy, and its mission was to abolish chaos. I know that sounds just as dumb and impossible as the Emperor wanting to defeat the Chaos Gods, but that was their goal. And spoiler alert, the Cabal, try as they did, obviously never had any chance whatsoever of even coming close to accomplishing their goal. But oh man, did they ever put poor John Grammaticus through the ringer in the process. His full story is too long to go through here, so I'll keep it short. Or at least my version of short. I'll keep it medium. John was born as a mortal human and was granted immortality later in life by the Cabal. They shared their vision of the galaxy with him, one that reached back tens of millions of years and one that stretched into multiple possible futures. Despite having been born on Terra and having met the Emperor personally at one point, Grammaticus eventually decided to support the Cabal's goals, which ran against a lot of what the Emperor and the Imperium were actively trying to accomplish. He became a pretty successful agent for the Cabal, but the deal he had struck with them, to put it simply, was not good. Since he had been offered immortality after his first death, he basically owed them his life. And owing a life debt to a secretive galaxy-spanning organization run by a council of aliens, whose plans are tens of thousands of years in the making, if not more, was not ideal. So John died a lot. But, of course, being a Perpetual, he always came back. Now, a lot of us tend to get bored at our jobs after a certain point. After John was a couple thousand years or so into working for the Cabal, he began to get a little disheartened too. His assignments had led to him interfering in the fates of primarchs such as Alfarius and Vulcan, and interfering in the fates of billions and billions of people. And he was tired of being told what to do, and tired of being the direct cause of so much pain and suffering. And so, eventually, he permanently lost his perpetuality after saving the life of Vulcan, violating his orders from the Cabal. And eventually, after even more turmoil, he was finally saved from his Cabal masters by the legendary Eldari Farseer Eldrad Ulthran, who vanished with him through a webway portal. So what's in store for John? We'll just have to wait and see. And by the way, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see individual videos in the future about any of the characters I talk about today. Now, those were two pretty cool, pretty important Perpetuals who played some pretty big roles in the Imperium and in how everything ended up unfolding. But we've got a couple more to look at, and this one specifically is, I think, very underrated. I don't think she's talked about nearly enough, and I'm guilty of that too. And I'm understating it when I say she is really, 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 really important. Of course, we're going to discuss the one and only Erda. Olanius played a big role in humanity's existence, but Erda arguably played just as big of a role. She had lived long before recorded history began, and she first met the Emperor when he was a simple warlord. He shared with her his vision for humanity, with Perpetuals like them steering our future in the right direction from behind the scenes. Erda became a fervent supporter of this vision, and stood by his side when many others abandoned him. As the Age of Strife came to an end, and the Emperor set his sights on galactic rule, the Primarch project was put into place. The Emperor did all of his cheeky, sneaky Emperor stuff, bartering with the Chaos Gods, lying to the Chaos Gods, stealing from the Chaos Gods, all the things you'd want the shepherd of your entire race to do. But there was still one last thing that remained. Erda's remarkable work on the science side of things was crucial in the creation of the Primarchs, but her incredibly rare genetic material was needed as well. The combination of the Emperor's and Erda's genes allowed for the Primarchs to be created. And this is, right now, your only warning. Don't say anything weird unless you want a one-way ticket to horny jail. The Emperor then proceeded to forbid Erda from further interacting with the Primarchs, as he planned to use them to obliterate trillions upon trillions of living beings across the galaxy. They weren't sons to him, they were tools, and Erda wasn't too happy about that. And she supposedly triggered the warp portal that opened up within the Emperor's gene lab where the Primarchs gestated, allowing them to be flung across the galaxy. I guess her thinking was, well, they're my sons too, and if you're gonna do that, I'm gonna just let them go through a portal into hell and just disappear because I love them or something. I don't know. Maybe she did have a good reason, but I don't. Now, we've also seen the 4 chosen word bearers, Argeltal, Dagotal, Zafin, and Malnor, be sort of warp time travel teleported into the gene labs by the demon Ingethel, where they caused the Geller field to fail. So whether it was all Erda or all the word bearers or a combination of the two or tied into something else entirely that allowed the Chaos Gods to interfere in the creation of the Primarchs, I guess we won't truly know. But Erda not only was essential in the creation of the Primarchs, she also played a major role in sending them through the warp, where each of them was affected in some way. Their fates were changed through her actions. For example, Angron was just given the most mind-bogglingly shitty life any living being could possibly experience. Mortarion didn't fare much better. And Lorgar was put on a planet that literally worshipped the dark gods of chaos. So, Erda, I know your heart was in the right place, and there was a lot of stuff going on, but man, that was a pretty bad outcome. Your choices, whoa, those were not great. Still though, she helped to create 9 loyalist Primarchs too. You know, some of them are alive, or, you know, doing some stuff. So, you know, thank you, Erda, for that. Good job. And we're going to move on. All right. Another Perpetual that I somehow genuinely forgot about until just now, as I was writing the script, is Malcador the Sigilite. This is crazy because the last 3 books I've read have all featured him pretty heavily, and I guess we can sum him up by pointing out that he is now known as Malcador the Hero because he sacrificed himself by holding down the Golden Throne and protecting Terra from being overrun by demons while the Emperor fought Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit. Malcador was an immensely powerful psychic, probably tied with Magnus, if not more powerful than him, and sitting only behind the Emperor in terms of power, as long as we're not counting any other races. That being said though, Malcador was only between 66 and 6,800 years old at the time of his death. And even though he died from having his body and soul burned out by the Golden Throne, I find his case kind of weird. We've talked about Perpetuals like Olanius and Erda just casually living for tens of thousands of years, but in the time leading up to Malcador taking his seat on the Golden Throne, most of his inner dialogue was just about how old and tired he felt. Like, in The End and the Death Part 1, you see lots of different perspectives of different characters, including Horus, John Grammaticus, and others. It doesn't directly tell you whose perspective you're reading, you just kind of figure it out from context clues. And then you'll be reading a perspective and realize it's Malcador because he's like, oh, this heresy situation is so dire and the Emperor needs my help, but fuck, my knees hurt so bad. Oh my god, I'm so old. I wish I could just take a nap, but Terra's being overrun by the traitors, so I can't do that. Oh, ow, my back. There's a slight exaggeration there, but you get my point. Now, I think I should take a moment to mention that Malcador has quite a legacy of his own. In the time leading up to the Siege of Terra, Malcador, despite wanting nothing more than to sit down with a cup of Earl Grey and a good book, was keeping himself pretty damn busy. He founded the Adeptus Administratum, the Officio Assassinorum, and he laid the groundwork for what would become the Imperial Inquisition, one of the most important and most feared aspects of the Imperium in the future. He also founded the Knights Errant, which would see some of its members found the Grey Knights. And you know, also, he kept humanity safe by sacrificing himself on the Golden Throne. I wonder if when Malcador was taken off of the Golden Throne and he just turned to dust, if anyone said, "There goes my hero, watch him as he goes." So guys, you see, that is a Foo Fighters song, which is a reference to the Foo Fighters joke from earlier. So I've brought it all the way around from the beginning of the video to like now. If you've made it this far, I assume that you're actually just cool listening to me saying literally anything at this stage. So I'm not even going to apologize for that one. You're welcome. I recorded myself singing that 4 times because I kept messing it up. So you're welcome. As you can see, Immortality is just one of those things that no science fiction or fantasy or science fantasy setting is truly complete without. Immortals can be singular characters who have absolutely massive influence over the setting, a lot of the time without even meaning to. And what I really like about 40k is that a perpetual does seem capable of losing their perpetualness, as long as they get bodied by someone in a cool enough way. Like Olanius. R.I.P. Olanius. But your death was pretty cool. Please never come back to life, King. Now, there are numerous other Perpetuals who I left out in this video, like Cyrene Valantian, who's actually one of my favorite characters. I'd rather just do a full video on her at some point, because she's pretty cool. She survived Monarchia, and did a lot of cool stuff, hung out with the word bearers. Eventually she had her soul torn apart by demons, and she still came back to life, and she was like immortal and a really powerful psyker, so that's pretty neat. We also have Olivia Sarica, Damon Pratanus, and oh my god, frickin' Vulcan. I'll also save talking about Vulcan for a full-length video in the future. My melanated king deserves that, at the very least. And speaking of kings and queens, as always, a massive shout out goes out to my channel members. The reverence the Imperial Guard have for Olanius Pius is nothing compared to the reverence I have for you fine folk. Thanks for continuing to support this channel, and my ramblings, and my conspiracy theories, and my jokes that I write down, and then almost laugh at, and then think, well, that's not really that funny. I don't think I should even keep that in the video. And then I keep it in the video, and then I get comments about how unfunny I am, which I then find those funny, so everything kind of ends up working out in the end. Anyways, you guys are the best. Now, if you would like to support my channel, you can do just that by liking, commenting, or even subscribing. And if you really want to, you can become a channel member by clicking the link in the description. Let me know what you thought of the video, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See you next time.